I found a huge chunk of my bucket list just sitting there in a bound book on the shelf of the thrift store. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle, and this is 101 best loved designs from Cross Stitch and Country Crafts. And just looking at the cover, you can tell that there's good stuff in here. Cross Stitch and Country Crafts is a magazine that was published in the 80s. It's this one. There are copies of this almost literally a dime a dozen at different estate sales and thrift stores and all over the place. It has to have been popular because I don't see any of the other magazines at all, let alone as frequently as I see these. I knew there was a book. I had not had my hands on a copy of the book. As soon as I found this, it was coming home with me. There was no question. There are so many gorgeous projects in here. The book came out in 1996, and not everything has aged well, but it is amazing how much of it has. Let's look and see what is in here so you can decide if you need a copy, and I'll show you what I want to stitch. These are cats, baskets, and quilts. A lot of these projects were published in collections over a period of a couple of issues. Antique trains and planes, a hummingbird sampler, botanical fruit. I promise you we are getting to the good stuff. Flies and lures. No one in my life is a fly fisher, but that Dimensions Gold Collections kit, Max in the Adirondacks, that cat belongs to a fly fisher, and he's sitting on a table with a bunch of fly fishing supplies, so maybe those could go together. This is Amid Amish Life. This is all 3 pieces of Amid Amish Life, and these have been on my bucket list to stitch forever. Everything I love about Counted Cross Stitch is here. These are Sunday Best and Young Man's Fancy. These were also already on my bucket list. He's holding a squirrel on a string, and her apron has lots of specialty stitches giving it texture. I know, they're creepy Victorian children. They would take hundreds of hours to stitch, and I am up for it. Christmas House is one I've seen before and considered stitching. The window is cut work, and the tree is stitched on a separate piece behind that. I had not seen Santa's List before. I don't do a lot of big Christmas projects, but I can totally see myself stitching him. I can also totally see myself stitching Spanish Sampler. I should have counted how many projects in this book I want to stitch, because there are a lot that I won't rest comfortably in my grave if I die before I have time to stitch them, and there are a lot of others that I like them. I might stitch them under the right circumstances. Nesting hens would be wonderful for my kitchen, especially if I stitched all 3 and did them as a wall quilt. Monday Meddler and Harvest Helper, not so much. Country Cousins. It is an Afghan with geese with bows, and my mom and grandmas were big into ceramics during the geese with bows era, so I'm not ready to get nostalgic about the geese yet. And here's Country Delicious. I did count twice, and I only came up with 90 designs, even if I counted all the individual ornaments. So there's some smaller things in here. I'm sure if they say 101, there must be 101, but don't expect 101 huge projects. Cottage Christening. There seem to be a lot of birth samplers. Twins. Some cup holder cozies and some rabbits. A pencil sampler, and then this one, Bedtime Silhouette. It says, the best kind of sleep beneath heaven above is under a quilt handmade with love. I have the magazine with that one, and I've thought about stitching it and talked myself out of it. Maybe someday. I like this nativity scene. If I was going to stitch a nativity scene, maybe someday. Religious symbols. Russian Christmas angels, and then look at this woodland Santa. The border and the animals in the corners. Again, I would stitch some of these. Festive heart hanger ornaments and heavenly angel ornaments. And then look at the carousel polar bear. And what is he? Reindeer. that should have been obvious that he wasn't a stag, he was a reindeer. This is the front and this is the back. These are stitched on a square piece of fabric and the corners are folded over and stitched in the back. The mischief-making reindeer, at first I didn't like at all, but then I saw that he was pulling the lights off the Christmas tree on her back, and if I liked waist canvas more, I'd say that was a future Christmas sweater. It might be. Never say never. These are In the Garden, another 3-issue series. It's a bird bath and a bench and a gate. Victorian Tapestry and Teacup Bell Pull. And then Rose Garden Sampler, which is another one that was on my bucket list prior to picking up this book. There are probably a dozen things here. Rose Tea Linens and Bouquet of Sunshine. That's another bucket list piece. There are a lot of things in this book that I definitely want to stitch. My copy is a little water damaged, and I'm not sure if it was that way when I picked it up or if that happened in the back of my car with my teenagers. Either way, I would have wanted this book. Halloween Hauntings. Jolly Finger Puppets and a Christmas Joy Bell Pull, and then the Box of Chocolates. When I very first started cross-stitching and was going to all the thrift stores with my grandma looking for magazines and supplies, I found the magazine with this pattern in it. It has been on my to-do list since the very beginning. We have napkin and placemat sets for Christmas, spring, summer, and harvest, and that's probably where my counting went off. I don't think I realized how many individual pieces were there. I do not stitch napkins. Oh, they did button covers with some of the individual candies from that heart box. I could do one candy. And now we are on to Sensational Samplers. The Gathering Honey Sampler, which I think is on everyone's bucket list. I don't know if you can see the honeycomb in the corner there. There's a glorious anniversary sampler. A Quaker sampler. A Dutch sampler. These are, I'm not an authority on traditional samplers. They look gorgeous and authentic and traditional to me. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And honestly, I'm just trying to stitch samplers that look pretty. These are needlework necessities. Some of the best are in the back here. This says Sew a Fine Seam, and look at that needle book is on Ada, and the white on the Ada looks surprisingly gorgeous. This one says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. I love that one and all the little details. And then there's some labels for handmade sweaters and stuff. No, I do not have, I have the patience to knit a sweater. I don't have the patience to cross stitch a label to go in it. As ye sow, so shall ye rip. And then look at that one. This one, there is a swan. My great grandma made where you would take a bar of soap and straight pins and glittery beads and make a swan with them. They're the tackiest things you have ever seen in your life, but my grandma, great grandma, that was the sort of thing she did. So I could see myself stitching collector's cabinet, and good, now I'm trying to figure out if I could embellish that swan with beads and make it look like one of grandma's, and that way lies madness, possibly. I adore this book. The patterns are available in the magazines, so I already have probably more than 3/4 of these, but I like the idea of having them in a book. That just seems much better for storage and keeping track of them long term. I got my copy for $3.50, which is a little more than I like to spend on a thrift store book. When I looked online, there are some very ridiculously expensive copies and there's some very affordable copies. So if you're trying to track it down, do some comparison shopping, because it was a popular magazine and I think it was a popular book, so there are copies out there. Thanks for watching. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle. How many hours do you think it would take to stitch all the things in the book I just told you I can't live without stitching? Because several years of nonstop stitching, maybe? I'm not worried about scheduling the future. I'm going to have fun stitching what I stitch, and hopefully there will be a lot of it by the time I'm done. I'll be back with more videos for you soon.